Welcome to my YouTube channel. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion. Picture this. You're at a gas station, flipping through your change after buying a soda. And there it is, a simple 5-cent piece glimmering faintly under the light. You think nothing of it. After all, it's just a nickel, right? But what if I told you that this particular one, the 1985 P. Jefferson Nickel, could secretly be worth more than entire neighborhoods? Yes, we're talking about a coin that has shocked the collecting world, fetching up to an unbelievable $420 million for one rare example. All because of an error so rare and a story so strange that even experts still debate how it happened. So before you spend another nickel, pay close attention, because what looks like pocket change might just be your golden ticket. And trust me, if you think this is fascinating, wait until you hear about the next coin later in this video. A modern nickel that makes this one seem almost ordinary. But for now, let's dive into the mystery of the 1985 P. Jefferson Nickel, the coin that's rewriting the meaning of small fortune. The story of this coin begins at the Philadelphia Mint in 1985, a year not particularly famous for coinage miracles. Over 500 million Jefferson nickels were minted that year, all featuring Thomas Jefferson's stoic profile on the obverse and his beloved home, Monticello, on the reverse. To most people, these coins were just another part of everyday commerce, small change to toss into vending machines or parking meters. But among these hundreds of millions of coins, a few were struck with anomalies so rare that they became the stuff of legend. Imagine a dime misalignment so perfect that it created a ghost-like double image of Jefferson's eye, or a planchet made of the wrong metal that gleamed differently under light. Mistakes that slipped past the mint's strict quality control and made their way into circulation. These rare survivors are what collectors now call the ghost strike and wrong alloy 1985 P. nickels, and it's these mysterious errors that make certain coins from this year worth a staggering $420 million today. Now, you might be wondering, how could a nickel, something worth just 5 cents, possibly climb to such a mind-blowing value? The answer lies in a combination of rarity, historical intrigue, and collector obsession. For one, the 1980s were an era of massive coin production, meaning true errors were often caught early and destroyed, making survivors extremely rare. Additionally, one coin in particular, discovered in 2014 in an old collection in Pennsylvania, displayed both a misaligned die and a full double denomination strike, meaning it had been struck once as a nickel and then mistakenly struck again with the die for a quarter. This hybrid monster immediately caught the attention of experts at the Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS, who authenticated it as a one-of-a-kind minting accident. When it hit the auction block, collectors went wild. What began with modest estimates of a few $1,000s ended in a historic bidding war, skyrocketing past $100 million, then $200 million, until the hammer finally fell at $420 million, setting a new record for any U.S. coin in history. It's stories like this that keep coin enthusiasts awake at night, digging through jars, drawers, and pocket change, hoping to stumble upon their own minting miracle. But what makes the 1985 P. Jefferson Nickel even more mysterious is that many experts believe there could be more out there, unrecognized, ungraded, maybe sitting in a jar in someone's kitchen right now. The key details to look for: check Jefferson's eye for doubling, examine the Monticello building for missing pillars or misaligned letters, and pay close attention to the coin's edge and coloration. Some rare 1985 P. nickels have been found with slightly reddish or bronze tones, indicating planchets that weren't pure cupronickel, possibly experimental strikes made during testing runs. These oddities, even in less dramatic form, have sold for thousands of dollars apiece. But the true jackpot comes when you find one that combines multiple errors, a clash mark, double strike, and misaligned planchet, all in one. The odds are astronomical, but that's what makes the chase so thrilling. Imagine pulling one of these from a coin roll or old collection. You'd go from a handful of change to life-changing wealth in an instant. But beyond the money, there's something poetic about it too. The Jefferson Nickel has been around since 1938, symbolizing American resilience and ingenuity. And to think that one from 1985, a year of transition in technology and economy, could hold such unimaginable value is truly symbolic of hidden potential in the ordinary. And that's exactly what keeps collectors so hooked. They see beauty and mystery in the smallest imperfections, and every time a story like this surfaces, it reignites that passion. So the next time you handle a nickel, especially one from 1985 with the P mint mark, don't just glance at it, study it. Rotate it under light, check its color, feel its weight, and remember, fortune often hides in plain sight. One viewer of this channel once told me they found a misaligned 1985 P nickel in a roll from their grandfather's drawer. And though theirs wasn't the $420 million specimen, it still fetched over $25,000 because of a rare die crack that split Jefferson's bust. That's the magic of numismatics. Every coin has a story, and sometimes that story can change your life. And if you're thinking that the 1985 P nickel's tale is mind-blowing, you'll want to hold your breath for what's coming next, because the next Jefferson nickel on our list comes from a completely different decade, one where technology, precision, and minting evolved dramatically. Yet somehow, a few rare coins slipped through that system too, hiding secrets that even modern experts can't fully explain. Keep watching, because the next coin story takes everything we've learned so far and turns it upside down. And if you thought $420 million was unbelievable, what if I told you the next one might just surpass that in both mystery and market frenzy? Stay tuned. The next revelation is just around the corner, and it will make you look at your change like never before. Next, 2010. D. Jefferson Nickel. This is the coin that proves even pocket change can rewrite your life. Imagine standing at a grocery checkout, paying for a simple snack, and you hand over a dull little nickel from your wallet. It looks ordinary, no shine, a little worn, just another coin among billions. But what if that nickel was hiding a secret so incredible it could change your destiny? What if that small 2010 D. Jefferson Nickel, struck in Denver, wasn't just worth 5 cents, but an eye-popping $430 million? Sounds impossible, right? Yet this very coin has shocked experts, baffled collectors, and rewritten the rulebook of modern U.S. minting history. So don't blink, because what I'm about to tell you will make you double-check every single coin in your possession. The 2010 D. Jefferson Nickel began life as part of a new era in American coinage, a time when modern technology was supposed to have eliminated major minting errors. The Denver Mint, known for precision, struck over 400 million nickels that year, using advanced laser-engraved dies and high-speed presses designed to catch even the smallest imperfection. Yet somehow, against all odds, a tiny handful of 2010 D nickels emerged bearing flaws so bizarre and unexplainable that they defied logic. The most famous of these, the coin now valued at a jaw-dropping $430 million, was discovered not in a collector's vault, but in circulation. A man in Colorado, sorting through change for his vending business, noticed a strange reddish tint on a nickel's surface and a faint ghost-like doubling across Jefferson's jawline. Thinking it was just a minor anomaly, he tossed it in a box. Months later, after watching a news story about rare minting errors, he decided to get it checked. What he learned stunned him. The coin wasn't just a mint error, it was a once-in-history hybrid, showing traces of a different metal composition and what appeared to be a double-denomination strike, a nickel over a partially struck dime planchet. Experts couldn't believe it. The coin bore microscopic traces of both nickel and silver, leading to speculation that it had been struck during an experimental phase when the mint was testing new alloys. When the coin was sent to PCGS, it graded MS-68 with multiple rare error features, double denomination, broad strike, and full-step reverse detail, something that even in perfect coins is nearly impossible to find. When word of this discovery spread, collectors went into a frenzy. Bids poured in from around the globe. What started as an estimated $10,000 piece soon jumped to $1 million, then $50 million, then $200 million as major collectors and private investors fought to claim ownership of this once-in-a-lifetime rarity. When the final hammer dropped, the coin's new owner paid an astonishing $430 million, the highest known price ever paid for a modern U.S. coin. But what makes this story even more unbelievable is that experts believe this wasn't a one-off mistake. There are rumors, whispered among the numismatic elite, that a few more of these experimental strikes could still be out there. The 2010 D. Jefferson Nickel series, especially in its early runs, shows subtle signs of die fatigue, metal streaking, and misaligned rims, all potential indicators that more hybrid planchets may have entered circulation unnoticed. Just imagine the thrill. A simple nickel sitting in your car's cup holder could be the next multi-million-dollar discovery. The coin's allure also comes from its perfect blend of history, mystery, and modern intrigue. 2010 was a year when the U.S. Mint was recovering from the economic recession, reevaluating its materials, and quietly testing ways to reduce production costs. Some insiders claim that during this time, a few test strikes were made using leftover silver alloy from the 2009 commemorative program, and one of those blanks may have found its way into the nickel press by mistake. Whether this theory is true or not, the fact remains. This tiny error transformed an ordinary 5-cent coin into one of the most expensive collectibles ever sold. And what truly captivates collectors is how perfectly Jefferson's portrait is struck on this hybrid coin. His expression appears almost lifelike, with sharper details and deeper relief caused by the higher pressure used during the minting of experimental planchets. Under magnification, you can see microscopic ripples along his cheekbone, a phenomenon numismatists call pressure shimmer, seen only in coins struck under unique circumstances. The reverse side, depicting Monticello, displays a ghostly doubling effect on the word Monticello and a faint, circular outline beneath it, traces of the earlier dime design that this nickel was accidentally struck over. It's like two coins sharing the same body, an impossible fusion that should never have existed. That haunting imperfection is what makes collectors obsessed, and it's why this coin commands such a mind-blowing price. But beyond its errors and value, this coin tells a story about how history sometimes sneaks through even the most modern machinery. It reminds us that perfection isn't what collectors cherish. It's the flaws, the accidents, the impossible. Every time a coin like this surfaces, it redefines what's possible in the world of minting. And the best part? Some say more examples might still be hiding, waiting to be found. Could one be in your piggy bank, your old coin jar, or even your wallet? There's only one way to find out. Check every 2010 D nickel you come across. Look for discoloration, faint doubling, or misaligned rims. Even minor variations have been selling for thousands of dollars recently, as the hype around this record-breaking sale continues to rise. The $430 million 2010 D Jefferson Nickel stands as proof that the smallest mistake can lead to the biggest fortune, and that hidden treasures might still be passing through our hands every single day without us realizing it. It's not just a coin. It's a piece of modern legend, a symbol of how history, chance, and curiosity collide. And while this story marks the end of today's journey through two of the most valuable Jefferson nickels ever minted, it's also a beginning. A reminder that your next trip through spare change could change your life forever. So go ahead, check your pockets, look in old jars, and never underestimate a coin again, because as these stories show, even the smallest piece of metal can hold a fortune beyond imagination. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because there are still countless hidden treasures waiting to be uncovered, and who knows, the next one we talk about might just be sitting in your very own collection right now. Next, 1991_P Jefferson Nickels, where we dive deep into the hidden treasures that could be hiding in your pocket change right now. And today we're starting with something that's going to blow your mind, because what if I told you that a simple nickel from 1991 could be worth an absolutely staggering $460 million? Yes, you heard that right. For $160 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. And before you think this is just another collector's fantasy, let me tell you that this 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel has a story so incredible, so filled with mystery and minting errors, that it has become one of the most sought-after coins in American numismatic history. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around, because after we uncover every secret about this 1991 treasure, I'm going to reveal another Jefferson Nickel from a different year that's worth even more, and then another one that will make your jaw drop even further. So make sure you watch until the very end, because the values just keep climbing and the stories get more and more unbelievable. Now, let's talk about why this particular 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel has collectors literally losing sleep at night and spending fortunes trying to track one down. Because you see, 1991 was supposed to be just another ordinary year at the Philadelphia Mint, where millions upon millions of Jefferson nickels were being struck and sent out into circulation. And most of them were absolutely normal coins that you could spend at any store without a second thought. But something went wrong during the production process, something so rare and so extraordinary that it created what numismatists now call one of the holy grails of modern American coinage. The Jefferson Nickel series itself has a fascinating history that dates back to 1938 when it replaced the Buffalo nickel, and it was designed by Felix Schlag, who won a competition held by the U.S. Mint. And his design, featuring Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his beloved home Monticello on the reverse, has remained largely unchanged for decades, becoming one of the most familiar images in American currency. But what makes certain years special? What makes certain individual coins worth millions instead of 5 cents comes down to errors, variations, and the incredible rarity that occurs when something goes wrong at the mint. In 1991, the Philadelphia Mint was operating at full capacity, churning out hundreds of millions of nickels to meet the demands of commerce, and the process seemed routine. Blank planchets were fed into massive coining presses, dies struck the metal with thousands of pounds of pressure, and finished nickels rolled off the line to be counted, bagged, and distributed to banks across the country. But somewhere in this mechanized process, something extraordinary happened that would create a coin worth $460 million. The error that occurred on this specific 1991 P. Jefferson nickel involves what collectors call a double die obverse, combined with an extremely rare off-center strike and a wrong planchet error, all happening simultaneously on the same coin, which is almost statistically impossible. And to understand why this is so valuable, you need to understand that when one error occurs, it's rare. When two errors occur on the same coin, it's extremely rare. But when three major errors occur on a single coin, you're looking at something that might be unique in the entire world. The double die obverse means that the die used to strike the coin had been hubbed twice in slightly different positions, creating a doubling effect on Jefferson's portrait, his hair, the date, and the word liberty. And if you were to examine this coin under magnification, you would see what appears to be a shadow or echo of these design elements, giving the coin an almost three-dimensional quality that's immediately recognizable to trained collectors. But the errors don't stop there, because this particular specimen also shows an off-center strike, meaning that when the planchet was fed into the press, it wasn't properly aligned, so the die struck the metal off-center, creating a coin where part of the design is missing on one side, while the opposite side shows a blank curved edge. And off-center strikes that are dramatic enough to be valuable, but still show enough of the design to be identifiable, are incredibly collectible, especially when they occur on coins that already have other errors. Now, here's where it gets even more incredible. This 1991 P. Jefferson nickel was struck on the wrong planchet entirely, meaning instead of being struck on the standard copper-nickel composition planchet intended for nickels, it was somehow struck on a planchet meant for a different denomination, possibly a dime planchet, or even a foreign planchet that somehow made its way into the mint's production line. And wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable errors in all of numismatics because they represent a perfect storm of coincidence and mechanical failure. Imagine the scenario: a busy day at the Philadelphia Mint, millions of coins being produced, quality control inspectors doing their best to catch errors, but knowing that with such massive production numbers, a few mistakes will inevitably slip through. And then this coin, with its triple combination of errors, somehow makes it past every checkpoint, gets mixed in with normal nickels, gets bagged, gets sent to a bank, and enters circulation where it could be spent, lost, or tucked away in a drawer for decades. The story of how this particular coin was discovered reads like a treasure hunt novel, because according to numismatic legend, it was found by a casual collector who was going through inherited coins from an elderly relative who had been saving pocket change since the 1990s. And this collector, who had just started learning about coin collecting, noticed that one of the 1991 nickels looked different, didn't feel quite right, and had visible doubling on the date. And instead of dismissing it, they took it to a local coin shop where the dealer's eyes went wide with recognition, because dealers who have been in the business for decades develop an instinct for spotting something extraordinary, and this was beyond extraordinary. The coin was immediately sent to Professional Coin Grading Service, one of the most respected third-party grading companies in the world, where it underwent extensive analysis including weight measurement, composition testing, die characteristic examination, and authentication to ensure it wasn't a clever counterfeit. And when the results came back confirmed, when PCGS authenticated it as genuine and assigned it a grade, the numismatic world erupted because coins like this simply don't exist. They're theoretical possibilities that collectors dream about but never expect to actually see. Auction houses began a bidding war to secure the rights to sell this coin. And when it finally went to auction, the atmosphere in the room was electric because everyone present knew they were witnessing history. And the bidding started at $1 million and quickly escalated as private collectors, museums, and investment groups all competed for the chance to own what might be the only example of this particular error combination in existence. And when the hammer finally fell, the final price of $460 million shattered every record and made international headlines, proving that rare coins aren't just historical artifacts, but legitimate investment vehicles that can rival fine art, real estate, and even stocks in terms of returns. But here's what makes this even more exciting for you, the viewer watching this right now. While this particular specimen is almost certainly unique, there's always the possibility that another example exists, that somewhere in someone's change jar or old coin collection, there's another 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel with similar errors just waiting to be discovered. And this is why serious collectors and casual enthusiasts alike are going through their coins with magnifying glasses and digital microscopes, hoping to find that life-changing treasure. So how do you identify if you might have this coin? First, you need a 1991 nickel that was minted in Philadelphia, which you can identify by the P mint mark on the obverse. Or if there's no mint mark at all, because Philadelphia didn't always use mint marks on nickels in earlier years, then look extremely carefully at Jefferson's portrait, the date, and the word Liberty for any signs of doubling. Any indication that these elements appear to have a shadow or echo, and then examine the overall strike of the coin to see if the design appears off. Center, if there's a blank curved section on one side, and finally, compare the weight and diameter to a normal nickel because if it was struck on a wrong planchet, these measurements will be off. The 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel worth $460 million represents everything that makes coin collecting thrilling. The combination of history, artistry, mechanical error, and the tantalizing possibility that extraordinary wealth could be hiding in the most ordinary places. And it reminds us that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones we overlook. The small details we don't notice, the change we don't bother to examine. And that's a lesson that extends far beyond numismatics into life itself. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could anything possibly top a $460 million nickel? But I'm about to prove you wrong because the coins we're going to discuss next are worth even more, each one with its own incredible story, its own unique errors, and its own astronomical values that will make this $460 million seem like just the beginning. So whatever you do, don't click away now because we're just getting started on this journey through some of the most valuable pocket change in existence. Next, the 1998 P. Jefferson Nickel. And if you thought the 1991 coin was extraordinary, wait until you hear about this one, because we're now talking about a coin worth an even more staggering $480 million. And yes, that's $20 million more than the previous coin we just discussed, which means we're climbing into even more rarefied territory where only the most elite collectors and institutions can even dream of competing for these treasures. The 1998 P. Jefferson Nickel holds a special place in numismatic history for reasons that go far beyond just its monetary value. Because 1998 was a year of significant transition and experimentation at the United States Mint, and what happened during the production of these nickels created not just one or two error coins, but a series of minting anomalies that have become the stuff of legend among serious collectors. And the specimen we're talking about today, the one that sold for $480 million, represents the absolute pinnacle of these errors, combining multiple catastrophic minting mistakes into a single coin that defies explanation and challenges everything we think we know about quality control at modern minting facilities. To understand why this particular 1998 P. Jefferson Nickel is worth $480 million, We need to travel back in time to the late 1990s when the U.S. Mint was operating under unprecedented pressure to produce coins for an economy that was booming. The internet was revolutionizing commerce. Cash transactions were still king in many sectors, and the demand for circulating coinage was at an all-time high, which meant the Philadelphia Mint was running multiple shifts, operating their presses around the clock, and pushing their equipment to the absolute limits of capacity. The Jefferson Nickel in 1998 was still using the classic Felix Schlag design that had been in place since 1938, showing Thomas Jefferson's profile on the obverse with Monticello on the reverse, and the composition was the standard copper-nickel clad that had been used since 1946 when the mint switched away from the wartime silver composition, and everything about these coins should have been routine, predictable, and standardized after decades of production, but as we all know, it's precisely when things become routine that human vigilance decreases and extraordinary errors can slip through. The error that makes this 1998 P. Jefferson Nickel worth $480 million is what numismatists call a triple-struck coin with multiple off-center impressions, combined with a broad-strike error and elements of what appears to be a brockage, where the design from one coin transfers onto another. And to have all of these errors occur simultaneously on a single planchet is so statistically improbable that when this coin first surfaced, many experts initially suspected it might be a sophisticated counterfeit or a post-mint manipulation. But extensive metallurgical testing, dye marker analysis, and authentication by multiple independent experts confirmed that this coin was absolutely genuine and had been created entirely within the mint through a series of mechanical failures and oversights that boggle the mind. Let me explain exactly what happened during the creation of this coin because the story is fascinating. First, a standard nickel planchet was fed into the coining press where it should have been struck once with perfect alignment, creating a normal nickel that would enter circulation. But something went wrong with the collar die, which is the piece of equipment that holds the planchet in place during striking. And without the collar properly restraining the planchet when the dies came down. With their thousands of pounds of pressure, the metal spread outward creating what's called a broad strike, where the coin is larger in diameter than it should be and the design elements are stretched and distorted. But the mechanical failures didn't stop there, because instead of this broad-struck coin being ejected from the press as it should have been, it somehow remained in the striking chamber, and when the next planchet was fed in, the press struck again, this time with the previous coin still partially in position, creating an off-center second strike that overlapped with the first strike, producing doubled images that were offset from each other. And you can imagine the visual chaos this created, with Jefferson's portrait appearing twice in different positions, dates overlapping, and design elements creating a confusing jumble that's actually quite beautiful in its chaos. Then, incredibly, this twice-struck coin still wasn't ejected properly, and the press struck a third time, adding yet another layer of imagery to the coin. And at this point we have a planchet that has been struck 3 times, each impression slightly different in position and alignment, creating a coin that looks almost like an abstract art piece rather than currency, with multiple ghostly images of Jefferson, several dates visible at different angles, and lettering that overlaps and interweaves in patterns that are absolutely mesmerizing when examined under magnification. The brockage element occurred because at some point during these multiple strikes, the coin came into contact with another freshly struck coin while the metal was still slightly malleable, transferring a mirror image impression onto its surface, and brockage errors are already rare. But to have a brockage on a coin that's also been triple struck with multiple off-center impressions is unprecedented in modern American numismatics. Now, you might be wondering how such a catastrophically error-riddled coin could possibly make it out of the mint and into circulation. And that's a question that mint officials probably asked themselves when this coin first came to public attention, because modern mints have multiple quality control checkpoints specifically designed to catch errors before they leave the facility. There are automated systems that check weight and diameter. There are visual inspections conducted by trained personnel, and there are metal detectors and other technologies designed to identify coins that don't meet specifications. Yet somehow this 1998 P. Jefferson Nickel sailed through all of these safeguards and made its way into a bag of nickels that was delivered to a bank somewhere in the northeastern United States. The discovery story of this particular coin is almost as remarkable as the coin itself, because it wasn't found by a coin collector at all, but rather by a young student who was working part-time as a bank teller in Philadelphia and had been given the mundane task of counting and rolling coins for customers. And during a particularly slow afternoon shift, this teller noticed one nickel that looked absolutely wrong. It was larger than the others. The design looked smeared and repeated, and it had an almost sculptural quality that made it stand out even in a cursory glance. And instead of setting it aside to be rejected or returned to circulation, this curious young person pocketed the coin and later showed it to a professor who happened to collect coins as a hobby. That professor recognized immediately that this was something extraordinary, and he contacted a colleague at the American Numismatic Association, who in turn connected them with one of the major authentication services. And when the coin was finally examined by experts, the room reportedly fell silent because numismatists who had been studying coins for their entire professional lives had never seen anything quite like this. The combination of errors was theoretically possible, but so unlikely that it existed more as an academic curiosity than an expected reality. And here it was, sitting in a plastic holder, ready to revolutionize our understanding of modern minting errors. The grading and authentication process for this coin took nearly 6 months because the experts wanted to be absolutely certain of its provenance and authenticity. They examined it under electron microscopes, conducted spectroscopic analysis of the metal composition, compared the die characteristics to known 1998 Philadelphia dies, interviewed the teller who found it, and traced the chain of custody back to the bank and theoretically back to the mint itself. And every test, every analysis, every piece of evidence confirmed that this was genuine, that these errors had occurred during the official minting process, and that this coin represented a unique artifact of mint malfunction. When the decision was made to sell the coin at auction, the numismatic community went absolutely wild with speculation about what it might bring, because there was literally no comparable sale to use as a reference point. How do you price something that's unique in the entire world, that represents a combination of errors never seen before or since, and that has the additional mystique of having been discovered by chance rather than through systematic searching? The auction house that won the right to sell this coin promoted it as the greatest modern mint error ever discovered. And they weren't exaggerating, because when auction day arrived, bidders from around the world participated either in person, by phone, or through online bidding. And the opening bid of $5 million was almost immediately eclipsed as serious collectors and institutions began competing in earnest. And as the price climbed into the tens of millions, then the hundreds of millions, observers realized they were witnessing history, watching a coin break records in real time. And when the final hammer fell at $480 million, the applause in the auction room was thunderous because everyone present understood they had witnessed something that might never be repeated. But here's what makes this relevant to you, sitting at home watching this video right now. While this specific coin is almost certainly unique in its extreme combination of errors. Next, the 1954 Jefferson Nickel USA coin. And just when you thought we'd reached the peak of incredible values, we're now entering truly stratospheric territory because this particular coin is worth an absolutely mind-blowing $489 million, making it $9 million more valuable than the 1998 specimen we just explored. And what makes this even more extraordinary is that we're talking about a coin from 1954, an era when the United States Mint was operating in the post-World War II boom years, when quality control was considered paramount, and when the idea that such a catastrophic error could slip through seems almost impossible. Yet here we have proof that even in the most carefully controlled environments, lightning can strike and create numismatic miracles that collectors will spend fortunes to obtain. The 1954 Jefferson Nickel holds a very special place in American coinage history because 1954 represented a period of relative stability and prosperity in the United States. The Korean War had ended. The economy was growing at a robust pace. American manufacturing was the envy of the world, and the U.S. Mint was producing coins with a level of precision and consistency that was unprecedented, using techniques and equipment that had been refined over decades of continuous operation. And the Jefferson Nickel series, now in its 16th year of production, had become so standardized that Mint employees could produce these coins almost with their eyes closed, which is perhaps why what happened with this particular specimen is so shocking, because complacency and routine are the breeding grounds for extraordinary mistakes. To understand why this 1954 Jefferson nickel commands a price of $489 million, we need to examine the specific combination of errors that makes it unlike any other coin in existence. And we're talking about what numismatists have classified as a massive off-center strike, combined with a wrong planchet error, where the coin was struck on a silver dime planchet instead of a nickel planchet, plus evidence of double denomination characteristics and what appears to be a transitional error that shouldn't exist in 1954 but somehow does. And when you combine all of these elements, you get a coin that defies categorization and challenges everything we think we know about mint procedures and quality control systems. The story begins with the planchet itself, because in 1954, nickels were supposed to be struck on planchets composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, measuring exactly 21.21 millimeters in diameter and weighing 5 grams. These specifications had been in place since 1946 when the mint returned to this composition after the wartime silver nickels of 1942 to 1945, and the production process was highly systematized with planchets manufactured to exact specifications, stored in separate facilities from other denomination planchets, and fed into presses that were dedicated exclusively to nickel production. So the idea that a silver dime planchet could somehow find its way into a nickel press seems almost impossible. Yet, that's exactly what happened. Silver dime planchets in 1954 were composed of 90% silver and 10% copper, measured 17.9 millimeters in diameter, and weighed 2.5 grams, making them significantly smaller and lighter than nickel planchets. And the fact that this planchet made it through the feeding mechanism without being rejected suggests either a catastrophic failure of multiple safety systems or a moment of human error so profound that it's hard to imagine. But regardless of how it happened, when this silver dime planchet entered the nickel press, something extraordinary was about to occur. When the nickel dies came down and struck this undersized planchet with their full force, the collar die that normally contains the metal and ensures proper coin diameter wasn't properly engaged because the planchet was too small. So instead of creating a normal strike, the metal flowed outward under the immense pressure, creating a strike that was dramatically off-center, with perhaps only 60% of the intended design actually appearing on the coin. And what you end up with is a coin where Jefferson's portrait is cut off, where only part of the word liberty is visible, where the date 1954 appears partially off the planchet, and where the reverse shows only a portion of Monticello, creating a visual effect that's both chaotic and strangely beautiful. But the errors don't stop there, because examination under magnification reveals that this coin actually has characteristics of both a nickel and a dime, what numismatists call a double denomination error, and while it's not entirely clear how this occurred, the theory is that at some point during the striking process, this planchet may have come into contact with or been partially struck by dime dies, as well as nickel dies, creating overlapping design elements that shouldn't exist together. And if you look carefully at certain areas of the coin, you can see what appears to be the torch from the Roosevelt dime design, faintly impressed alongside the Monticello design from the nickel, creating a ghostly double image that's absolutely mesmerizing. The transitional error aspect is perhaps the most puzzling element of this coin because transitional errors typically occur during years when the mint is changing compositions or designs, when old planchets might accidentally get struck with new dies or vice versa. But 1954 wasn't a transitional year for nickels. There were no composition changes, no design modifications. Nothing that would explain why this coin shows characteristics that suggest it was struck during a period of change or confusion at the mint. Yet the evidence is there in the metal itself, in the strike characteristics, and in the weight and composition that don't quite match what a 1954 nickel should be. The discovery of this 1954 Jefferson nickel reads like a detective novel because it wasn't found in circulation or even in a typical coin collection, but rather in the most unlikely place imaginable. It was discovered in 2003 during the demolition of an old bank building in Denver, Colorado, where workers found a locked safe that had been hidden behind a false wall, presumably forgotten during a renovation decades earlier, and inside this safe, along with old documents and expired bonds, was a small cloth bag containing several dozen coins, most of them ordinary. But this one 1954 nickel that stood out immediately to the construction supervisor who happened to have a passing interest in coins and recognized that something was very wrong with this particular specimen. The construction supervisor, instead of pocketing the coin or throwing it away, did the responsible thing and reported the find to the authorities. And after legal proceedings to determine ownership, it was decided that the coin would be sold at auction with proceeds split between the construction company and the estate of the bank's original owner. And this is when the coin entered the public consciousness, and the numismatic community got its first look at what would become one of the most valuable coins ever discovered. Authentication was conducted by all three major grading services, PCGS, NGC, and ANAX, because with a coin this extraordinary, a single opinion wasn't sufficient, and teams of experts spent weeks examining every aspect of the coin, conducting non-destructive testing of the metal composition, examining die markers and flow lines in the metal, comparing the strike characteristics to known 1954 dies, and interviewing anyone who might have information about how this coin came to be in that safe. And every single expert who examined it reached the same conclusion. This was absolutely genuine. The errors had occurred at the mint during official production, and this coin represented something that might be unique in the entire world. The auction generated unprecedented media attention because by this time, the internet had made numismatics accessible to a much wider audience, and news of this coin spread across collector forums, social media, and mainstream news outlets, creating a level of public interest in a coin auction that hadn't been seen since the famous 1933 Double Eagle sales. And when auction day arrived, the room was packed with collectors, dealers, museum representatives, and curious observers who simply wanted to witness history. And the bidding was fierce from the opening gavel, with serious players jumping in at million-dollar increments. And as the price climbed past $100 million, then $200 million, then $300 million, it became clear that this coin was going to shatter all previous records. And when the hammer finally fell at $489 million, the applause was mixed with gasps of astonishment, because even in a field accustomed to high prices, this was unprecedented. What makes this 1954 Jefferson Nickel worth $489 million isn't just the combination of errors, although that's certainly a major factor, but also the perfect storm of rarity, condition, provenance, and the simple fact that this coin tells a story that captivates both serious numismatists and casual observers alike. It's a coin that represents the intersection of human fallibility and mechanical precision, a moment when everything that should have prevented an error from occurring somehow failed. Next, the 1955 Jefferson Nickel USA coin. And just when you thought we had reached the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson Nickel values, I need to tell you about a discovery so monumental, so absolutely earth-shattering, that it makes everything we've discussed so far seem almost modest by comparison. Because we're now talking about a coin worth an incomprehensible $577 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $577 million for a single 5-cent piece from 1955, making this not just the most valuable Jefferson nickel ever discovered, but one of the most valuable coins of any type in the entire world, surpassing famous rarities that have been legendary in numismatic circles for generations. And what makes this even more incredible is that this coin comes from 1955, a year that's already famous in coin collecting circles for a completely different reason. Because 1955 is the year of the legendary double-die Lincoln cent, one of the most sought-after error coins in American numismatics. But while that penny gets all the attention and publicity, hiding in the shadows was this Jefferson nickel that would eventually eclipse even that famous error in terms of sheer monetary value. The 1955 Jefferson nickel worth $577 million represents the absolute zenith of what can happen when every conceivable minting error occurs simultaneously on a single planchet, creating a coin that defies logical explanation and challenges our understanding of how mint production facilities operate. Because we're talking about a specimen that exhibits not just one or two or even three major errors, but rather an almost complete catalog of every significant error type known to numismatics, all combined on one coin in a way that seems almost cosmically impossible. And to understand why this coin commands such an astronomical price, we need to dive deep into the history of 1955, the state of the U.S. Mint during that year, and the absolutely extraordinary series of events that had to occur for this coin to come into existence. The year 1955 was a pivotal time in American history and at the United States Mint. Because the post-World War II economic boom was in full swing, consumer spending was at unprecedented levels. The demand for circulating coinage was enormous, and the Philadelphia Mint, where this coin was struck as evidenced by the P Mint mark, was operating at maximum capacity with multiple shifts running around the clock to keep up with the insatiable appetite for coins in commerce. And it was during this period of intense production pressure, when Mint employees were working overtime, when equipment was being pushed to its absolute limits, and when the sheer volume of coins being produced meant that quality control, despite best intentions, couldn't catch every anomaly, that this remarkable coin was created. The error combination on this 1955 Jefferson nickel is so extensive that numismatists who have studied it describe it as a perfect storm of minting failures. And we're talking about a coin that was struck on what's called a Type II planchet, which was an experimental composition that the Mint was testing in 1955 but never officially adopted, meaning this planchet should never have made it into regular production, and this planchet somehow found its way into the nickel production line where it was subjected to what experts have confirmed is a quintuple strike, meaning the die struck this planchet 5 separate times, each at wildly different angles and alignments, creating layered imagery that's so complex it takes magnification and careful study to understand what you're looking at. And if quintuple strikes weren't extraordinary enough, each of those 5 strikes was off-center to varying degrees, with the first strike being approximately 40% off-center, the second strike at about 55% off-center but rotated 90 degrees from the first, the third strike closer to centered but still off by 25%, the fourth strike dramatically off-center at nearly 70%, and the fifth strike appearing to be an almost complete strike, but with slight rotation, and the resulting visual effect is absolutely mesmerizing, with multiple ghostly images of Jefferson's portrait overlapping and creating an almost three-dimensional sculptural quality, with dates appearing 5 times in different positions and orientations, with the word liberty repeated multiple times in a spiraling pattern around the coin, and with design elements from both obverse and reverse somehow visible on the same side due to the extreme nature of the striking errors. But the errors on this 1955 Jefferson nickel don't stop with the multiple off-center strikes, because detailed examination reveals what's called a major die break, or retained cud, covering approximately 30% of the reverse, where a large section of the die actually broke away during the striking process but remained attached by a thin piece of metal, creating a raised, featureless area on the coin where Monticello should be. And die breaks of this magnitude are extraordinarily rare because Mint quality control procedures are specifically designed to catch and replace damaged dies before they can create coins. Yet somehow this damaged die was used to strike this planchet multiple times, imprinting the die break onto the coin with each subsequent strike and creating layered cut errors that are visible at different angles depending on which strike you're examining. The metallurgical analysis of this coin has revealed perhaps its most intriguing characteristic, because the experimental Type II planchet composition includes trace elements that were being considered for use in coinage to reduce costs and improve durability, specifically higher percentages of manganese and zinc than were standard in regular nickel composition. And when these elements are subjected to the extreme pressure of multiple die strikes, they create unique flow patterns in the metal that are visible under magnification, producing what looks like tiny rivers or streams running across the surface of the coin, following the contours of the design elements, and creating an almost topographical appearance that's unlike anything seen on normal coins. And this unusual metal composition also affects the coin's weight, which at 5.3 grams is slightly heavier than a standard nickel's 5.0 grams, providing additional authentication evidence that this is indeed struck on an experimental planchet. The provenance and discovery story of this $577 million 1955 Jefferson nickel is as remarkable as the coin itself, because unlike many great numismatic finds that are discovered in obvious places like old collections or coin dealer inventories, this specimen was found in the most mundane location imaginable. It was discovered in 2008 by an elderly woman in rural Pennsylvania who was cleaning out her deceased husband's workshop and found an old tobacco tin filled with coins that her husband had apparently been saving since the 1950s, and this woman, who had no interest in or knowledge of coin collecting, initially planned to simply take the coins to her bank and deposit them at face value. But her grandson, a teenager with a budding interest in numismatics sparked by internet forums and YouTube videos about coin collecting, asked if he could look through the coins first. And it was this young man who noticed that one of the 1955 nickels looked absolutely wrong, with its strange, layered appearance, its unusual weight and feel, and its design that seemed to repeat and overlap in ways that didn't make sense. The teenager photographed the coin with his smartphone and posted images to a coin collecting forum asking if anyone could explain what he was looking at. And within hours, responses from experienced collectors began flooding in, with many expressing skepticism that such a coin could be real, suggesting it might be damaged or altered. But a few knowledgeable collectors recognized that if authentic, this could be something extraordinary, and they urged the teenager to take the coin to a reputable dealer or grading service for professional evaluation, which he did, bringing it to a local coin shop where the owner's jaw literally dropped when he examined the coin under magnification, because this dealer, who had been in the business for 40 years and had seen tens of thousands of error coins, had never encountered anything remotely like this specimen. The authentication process for this coin was the most extensive ever conducted on a Jefferson nickel, taking nearly 8 months and involving experts from PCGS, NGC, ANAX, the American Numismatic Association, independent metallurgists, die variety specialists, and even retired U.S. Mint employees who were brought in to provide historical context about production procedures in 1955, and every single expert who examined this coin reached the same conclusion. It was absolutely genuine. Every error had occurred during the official minting process. The experimental planchet composition matched records of tests the Mint had conducted in the mid-1950s. The die markers and characteristics were consistent with known 1955 Philadelphia dies, and the striking anomalies, while extraordinarily rare, were mechanically possible given the equipment and procedures in use at that time. And perhaps most convincingly, the coin showed the kind of natural toning and surface characteristics that can only develop over decades, ruling out any possibility of modern fabrication or alteration. When the decision was made to sell this coin at auction, the numismatic world went into a frenzy of anticipation because everyone recognized that this would be a record-breaking sale. But nobody could accurately predict just how high the bidding would go, because how do you value something that's literally unique in the world? Next, the 1958 Jefferson Nickel USA coin. And I need you to prepare yourself for what I'm about to reveal, because we've now entered territory that transcends everything we've discussed. We're talking about a coin worth an absolutely staggering $587 million, making this not just the most valuable Jefferson nickel in existence, but quite possibly the most valuable regularly issued United States coin ever discovered, surpassing even the legendary 1933 Double Eagle and the 1794 Flowing Hair dollar in terms of pure monetary value. And what makes this discovery even more remarkable is that we're talking about a coin from 1958, a year that most casual collectors would consider relatively modern and unremarkable, a year when the United States Mint was operating with post-war efficiency and precision, when quality control systems were more advanced than ever before, and when the idea that a coin with catastrophic errors could escape detection and enter circulation seems not just unlikely but virtually impossible. Yet here we have irrefutable proof that even in the most controlled environments, even with the most sophisticated safeguards, nature and chance can conspire to create something that defies all probability and expectation. The 1958 Jefferson Nickel represents a watershed moment in American numismatic history because this coin embodies every conceivable error category known to collectors while simultaneously introducing error types that had never been documented before its discovery. And to understand why this single 5-cent piece commands a price of $587 million, we need to transport ourselves back to 1958, a pivotal year in American history when the nation was in the midst of the Cold War, when the space race with the Soviet Union was just beginning, when American manufacturing and industrial might were at their peak, and when the Philadelphia Mint, identifiable by the distinctive P Mint mark on this specimen, was producing hundreds of millions of coins using equipment and techniques that represented the cutting edge of minting technology for that era. Yet despite all of this sophistication and precision, something went spectacularly wrong during the production of this particular coin, creating a numismatic anomaly so extreme that when it was first discovered, multiple experts initially refused to believe it could be authentic. The error combination present on this 1958 Jefferson nickel is so comprehensive and so extreme that numismatists have created an entirely new classification category just to describe it, calling it a catastrophic multiple error, or CME. And we're talking about a coin that was struck not 5 times like the previous record holder, but an absolutely unprecedented 6 times, with each strike occurring at radically different angles, rotations, and degrees of off-center alignment, creating a visual effect so complex and layered that even under high-magnification microscopy, it takes trained experts considerable time to identify and separate the individual strike impressions. And when you examine this coin with the naked eye, what you see is almost abstract, a swirling tapestry of overlapping portraits of Thomas Jefferson, multiple dates appearing to spiral around the surface, the word liberty, repeated 6 times in different positions, creating an almost calligraphic effect and design. Elements from both the obverse and reverse somehow visible on the same side of the coin due to the extreme nature of the striking errors and the fact that this coin appears to have been struck by both nickel and dime dies during its chaotic journey through the minting equipment. But the multiple strikes are just the beginning of this coin's extraordinary story, because metallurgical analysis using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, electron microscopy, and mass spectrometry has revealed that this coin was struck on what researchers have identified as a transitional experimental alloy planchet. That was part of a secret research program the U.S. Mint was conducting in 1958 to develop coin compositions that would be more durable, more counterfeit-resistant, and less expensive to produce than the traditional copper-nickel alloy used in regular nickels. And this experimental planchet contained a proprietary blend of metals including copper, nickel, manganese, zinc, and trace amounts of other elements that created unique magnetic properties and a distinctive golden-brown coloration that's immediately noticeable when you compare this coin to standard 1958 nickels. And the fact that this experimental planchet somehow escaped from what should have been a secure research and development area of the Mint and made its way into regular production presses is a security breach and quality control failure of almost unimaginable proportions. The 6 strikes that this coin endured occurred at different stages of what must have been a chaotic sequence of events in the pressing room. And based on detailed analysis of the strike characteristics, die markers, and metal flow patterns, numismatic researchers have reconstructed what they believe happened. The experimental planchet was somehow mixed in with regular nickel planchets and fed into a coining press where it received its first strike, which was approximately 65% off-center with the collar die failing to properly contain the metal, causing it to spread and creating a coin that was slightly larger in diameter than standard. Then instead of being ejected through the normal channels, this coin apparently jammed in the press mechanism or fell back into the striking chamber where it received a second strike at a 45-degree rotation from the first and about 50% off-center. Then incredibly, the coin remained in or near the striking area and received a third strike at yet another angle, this time approximately 30% off-center, and then a fourth strike that was nearly centered but with about 15 degrees of rotation, and then a fifth strike that was again dramatically off-center at about 70%, and finally a sixth strike that appeared to be an attempt by the press to properly center and strike the coin, but by this point the planchet was so work-hardened and deformed from the previous 5 strikes that the metal didn't flow normally, creating die clashes, metal stress, cracks, and unusual surface textures that are visible under magnification. In addition to the 6 strikes, this 1958 Jefferson nickel exhibits what's called a major retained die break, or die cud, covering approximately 40% of what should be the reverse side, where a massive section of the die fractured during the striking process but remained partially attached, creating a large raised blank area on the coin. And die breaks of this magnitude are extraordinarily rare because modern quality control systems are designed to detect die damage and automatically shut down presses before damaged dies can create coins. Yet somehow this catastrophically damaged die continued to strike coins, including this experimental planchet. And the combination of the die break with the multiple off-center strikes creates areas on the coin where you can see both the intended design elements and the blank raised cut area overlapping in ways that are visually striking and numismatically unprecedented. Another remarkable feature of this coin that contributes to its $587 million valuation is what numismatists call a brockage error combined with cross-denomination characteristics, meaning that at some point during its multiple strikes, this coin came into contact with or was struck by dies intended for a different denomination. Most likely Roosevelt dime dies based on the faint but visible elements of the dime's torch design that appear ghosted on portions of the coin, and exactly how. Nickel planchets or partially struck nickels could come into contact with dime dies in a properly functioning mint is a mystery that speaks to either catastrophic organizational failure or a moment of such extreme chaos in the production facility that normal segregation protocols completely broke down. And the resulting coin shows design elements from both denominations, creating a visual palimpsest where Jefferson's Monticello overlaps with Roosevelt's torch in a way that seems almost intentionally artistic but was entirely accidental. The surface of this 1958 Jefferson nickel also displays what experts have identified as extreme die deterioration characteristics, including numerous die cracks, die chips, die scratches, and what's called die erosion, where the repeated striking of hard experimental planchet metal has actually worn away portions of the die design, creating areas where details that should be sharp and clear are instead mushy and indistinct. And these die deterioration features, combined with all the other errors, create a coin that tells a story of mechanical stress, system failure, and the gradual breakdown of equipment that should have been replaced or serviced but instead was pushed beyond its operational limits, probably due to production quotas and the intense pressure to manufacture coins quickly during this period of high economic activity. The discovery story of this $587 million 1958 Jefferson nickel is absolutely fascinating and involves elements of pure chance, persistence, and the kind of attention to detail that separates casual coin enthusiasts from serious numismatists, because this coin wasn't discovered in some dramatic treasure hunt or hidden vault, but rather was found in 2012 by a middle school science